Hello, everyone. Welcome to Here on Earth. My name is Marley Daintree. I'm your host. I'm here today with Loretta Honeychurch. Loretta is a transformation specialist with over 17 years of experience in the healing and personal development space. She is a board certified trainer of NLP, timeline therapy, hypnosis, professional coaching, and holds a certificate in Marshall Goldsmith leadership development. Alongside these credentials, Loretta is clairvoyant and intuitive coach, a Biofield Tuner, and Reiki Practitioner. Her work blends science and spirit, structure and intuition. Having pledged many years ago to devote herself to the study of sacred teachings and to live a life for the greater good, Loretta brings both wisdom and compassion to those she works with. Through continuous study, coaching, and mediumship, she guides people in a non-judgmental and nurturing way, helping them transform into the person they need to be so that they can create the life they desire. In addition to her transformational work, Loretta is also an e-commerce business owner. Whether she's supporting leaders, creatives, or seekers, her mission remains the same: to help people step into their fullest potential and to live a life aligned with their dreams. Hi, Loretta. Thank you
Wow,
for joining me.
that's a lot.
Sorry, I'm short of breath.
It's good.
All
It's
right.
great to be here on your podcast.
Yes, thank you for joining me. I met you many years ago now. I think the first time we met was 2012 or 13 in Albury at a yoga
Yeah.
class, and you were doing Reiki, and I had a Reiki session with you, and that was my first
Well, that's
experience
right.
of Reiki. And I
Yeah.
remember that I just started sobbing and crying. I was going through, it was sort of like I'd just gone through a breakup and moved across the country and was in a bit of a weird space. And I felt, looking back now, I feel like it was like a huge release that something like cracked open then. And it was, yeah, I was like, oh, wow, like that was amazing. And I think still with all the different Reikis and things that I've tried, that first session was like the most powerful or profound that I sort of experienced. And then we went on to work together
Yeah.
years later after I had my son. I ended up doing coaching with you with the breakthrough coaching program. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's wonderful to have you on. Um,
Thank
I'd
you.
love I'd love you to tell me and our audience more about your own life journey and how you came to the work that you do now.
Yep. Sure. It's it's funny because it was never like a calling for me. It wasn't like I knew what I wanted to do this work. Um, it was a pure coincidence, to be honest. So it was I actually used to work in the film industry as a set builder, so something completely removed. And after my son was born, I didn't want to go back to that world. And I said out loud one day, I'm ready for something new. And the next day, I got a phone call from a friend of mine who is a world renowned trainer. And she said, I'm hosting this event in Sydney. I'd love some help. Do you want to come up for the week, assist me, checking people in and helping people, but you can take the training. And I thought, okay, sure. Like I didn't even know what it was. But I was ready for something new. I was ready for a break. And so I went to Sydney for that week, and it was the practitioner level of NLP, timeline therapy and coaching and hypnosis. And it had such a profound effect on me that by the end of the 7 days, I had signed up and paid for every other training available. And so it wasn't so much that, as I said, I wasn't called to it, but it called to me in this really, really serendipitous way. And and then because of the effect that it had on me, because of how dramatically I changed just in that 7 day training, I actually then I felt cold. Then I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is something that I could create a future with, right? And it was perfect at the time because I just wanted to work part time because my son was he was only 3 at the time. But the more I did it, the more I worked with people, and the more I saw how profoundly it could change people's lives, the more addicted, I guess, I became to the work.
Mhm. Can you explain what is NLP and timeline therapy?
Yeah, so I think the best way to explain NLP, well, it stands for neuro linguistic programming, but in a nutshell, it's like the mechanics of the mind. It's the mechanics for change. So whereas psychology offers you the science of of the mind, NLP is how to change it. It's how to do the change work. So it's the mechanical aspect of it. Timeline therapy is a technique where we can, through working with the unconscious mind, we can kind of travel back in time to a moment in time where we developed a belief, or a fear, or a negative emotion was created, and we can tap into that moment and discover the missing piece of information that when we bring it back into the light, it allows the emotion or the belief to release. Um, that's probably the best way for me to explain timeline therapy. And then we couple those two things with all the other coaching techniques, and then hypnosis, which allows us to tap into the unconscious mind, makes for a really powerful change tools.
Mm. Yeah, and what did you notice? I guess there's lots of different frameworks that I think about this, but like most of our sort of stuff in life seems to come from like a limiting belief that we formed at some stage. So what did you notice when you started to work with people around like, I don't know, sort of patterns and transformations that would happen?
Yeah. So the thing I noticed was all limiting beliefs are preceded by a decision, and normally they all go back to a specific period of time in those really formative years between 0 to 7, where something might have happened, and I'm not talking about severe trauma here. I'm just talking about those aspects of self that you hide in the shadows. So, you're what's one for me, a perfect example. I don't know. I used to sing. I used to love singing really loud, like crazy loud. And one day, I must have been singing in my bedroom a little bit too loud. I think I was about 8. And I clearly remember my one of my parents telling me to, I don't think they said the words "shut up." I can't remember, it was so long ago, but they told me to stop making so much noise. And so after that, for a very long time, I just didn't sing. And it wasn't until much later as an adult, when I understood how to access that information, that I had shut down that part of me, because I had decided to believe that they thought I was a terrible singer, so I shouldn't sing. And so I created this false belief. And then what I really discovered was, when I did my timeline therapy, all they wanted was some peace and quiet. I made it mean something that it wasn't. So once I'd recovered that missing piece of information, the belief disappeared. So all all the limiting beliefs come from that period of time where we're developing our values and beliefs. And sometimes they're just based on information that isn't true.
Mm,
And then you go through your whole life believing a certain thing that's not based on truth, which is the sad and frustrating part about it.
mm, mm. I guess what I sort of wonder about like timeline therapy or a similar thing, I think, is like emotion code and body code, those books that's
Yep.
similar about like finding that trapped emotion or trapped belief, is like, do people need these therapies or do people discover these beliefs in other ways and break them in other ways? Or do you think that people really do need to be proactive about going through their own psyche and finding all their limiting beliefs to sort of set themselves
I
free?
think it's all of the above.
Mm.
I think it's all of those things. So because of all of my training now, I don't need help outside of myself because I already know all the answers. I know how to find all the answers within. And I spend my whole life in doing timeline therapy every day. I do it on myself. But I also understand because because of the knowledge and the techniques I know about finding emotions in the body, I can scan my body and find emotions where they're trapped and then use either a tuning fork or I'll do timeline therapy on that part of my body to let go of that emotion. And that just comes from being self aware and knowing. A lot of people don't know that you can even do this stuff.
Mm.
And therefore, going to a practitioner who can do it for you is perfect.
I'm also really curious about your mediumship and clairvoyance skills. I know that when I was pregnant with my daughter, you had a vision of her. And so when did that start happening for you? Or was that since you were a child?
That's been since I was a kid. Yeah. I remember my fondest memories are when I was a little kid. I used to go and stay with my grandmother who lived in Bright in northeastern Victoria, and there was across the road from her was a river and a pine forest. And I swear to God, I used to go down there and play with the fairies under the pine trees. And Nana Honeychurch, God love her, she always supported that. She would play along with the game and she would talk to me about the fairies as if they were real. Now, maybe they were real, maybe they weren't, that was kind of where it started for me.
Mm.
So I always had that belief that there was more than to life, thanks to the fairies. And then they cut the forest down, which is a whole other story. Um, and then other things happened. I just knew things. As a kid, I just knew things. And I was also really creative. And I think that intuitive people have a different level of creativity. Then more definite things happened as I got older. So when my grandfather died, I was 15 and he was in the hospital and I was staying in their house, Nana and grandfather's house with my family. And I knew before I was told that he died. Then another time, much later, when my other grandfather, my nonno, passed away, I was staying in my grandparents' house, and I was sleeping in what was a bedroom that was built on their old porch. So the door was like a screen door, like a a mozzie screen door, but it had shutters. It had a pull down blind. Anyway, he was when he passed away, I was lying in bed and it was a perfectly still night and the blind opened and closed and I just felt this really strong presence of him being there. And it didn't freak me out. I was just like, oh, Nonno's here. Right. It was just normal to me.
Mm.
But I never really developed it into anything for the longest time. And a little bit of that was because there was still a lot of taboo around being a medium.
Mm.
And so I let that kind of um, influence how I didn't actualize my talent for that. And then over time, as I did more work on myself and became more confident, I was just like, oh, I'm just a medium. That's just the way it is.
Mm. Yeah, so did you feel like there was ever a scary part of it, or where you wondered if it was
No, I've never felt scared. I've had crazy, weird experiences, but I've never felt scared. No. Mm.
and what do you think this is a big question, but what do you think, what do you think is going on with, like, fairies and entities and, like, I don't know, how do you think the universe works? How do you think that spirits and the other realms
But you know what? I don't know.
Yeah.
I really don't know. I used to question it. I used to think I need to know, I need to know, and now I don't. And it's one of those, nobody could answer that question really. However, I do have some thoughts on it. Whether they're true or not, I wouldn't claim either way. I have no idea, because basically I have no idea. None of us do. Where to begin? I do believe that there is more to this than we can see, than our senses can perceive. Absolutely more to it. We're so limited in the meat suit to, what, 6 senses? And there's so much more out there that we can't hear and we can't see. So to think that this is it, I think is erroneous, because it isn't. I also think that we as humans have this incredible apparatus, the nervous system, the mind, that works as a transmitting and receiving station. And when we are still enough, and probably in a little bit of a trance helps, we start to have access to the world beyond our 5 senses. Now, I can't explain it. Like, I don't really know the science behind it. When I was studying remote viewing with Dr. David Morehouse, he had a great explanation for it that made a little bit more sense to me. And he said something like, everything exists as atoms, and everything exists as a wave. Everything that exists has a waveform expression, like a unique waveform expression. And all of those waveform expressions are available to us all the time. They are omnipresent and always available to us. So it's whether we have the ability to tap into those waveform expressions that allows us to see more than what we can perceive here on Earth. Does that make sense?
My son did a class recently. It's called Blindfold Vision Training. It's with Dr. Edith Chan and
Oh yeah,
have you heard of it?
a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. But it's sort of it sort of leads to remote viewing. So it's you have a blindfold on and you're seeing different colors, and then it was amazing. They have all different theories. I should get someone on to talk more about it that knows more, but different theories about that we have like sensors in our skin, and or like that there's all different ways to perceive things. So with my son, because of the time difference, we would do the class early morning, and we'd sit on the balcony where we'd try to get the sun, but the sun would just be coming up. And often he would struggle in the beginning of the class. And then there was a few times where it's like the sun came over the building next to us and it would shine on his skin and he'd suddenly see everything around him. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, it was really bizarre. And then also another part of the training was to meditate and to get centered and to relax. It was funny with my daughter, like she's 3. She'd sit there with us doing her little deep breaths. And then I put the blindfold on her one day and she was just like knowing all the colors in a row. And she's also done some, like sometimes she knows exactly what I'm thinking, but I find it like a bit confronting because I think all kinds of adult things. So I'm like, oh, I hope she doesn't hear everything.
So it's interesting that you say that, because we're always transmitting and receiving information all the time. As long as there's brain activity, you are transmitting and receiving information. So you're sending out information all the time. So it's not unreasonable that if she's tuned in to your waveform expression, that she's picking up on what you're thinking.
Like we were making a card the other day for my mum's birthday, and I offered her a bunch of cardboard. And then as soon as I offered it to her, I thought like, oh, she better pick yellow because that's the only one that the color's actually going to show up on because of the pen that she was using. And she looked at me and she was like, okay, yellow then. And I was like, did you just hear me? I was like, did you just hear me think yellow? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, okay.
Yeah. So what I found interesting about doing Dr. David Morehouse's course was, I mean, it's fascinating work, but one of the things he said is when you do remote viewing, people mistakenly think that you're sending your consciousness to a place, to a location. But he said because of the way information waveforms are available all the time, everywhere, he said you're not actually going anywhere other than where you are. You're just tapping into different wavelengths of waveforms of information.
Mm,
So it's always around you. It's
mm,
just it's like I would liken it to a radio station, when in the old days where you would turn the dial to tune into the station.
mm,
That's what we're doing, basically.
mm. Yeah. And in the like in the blindfold training, like Dr. Edith Chan says, like this isn't paranormal abilities or anything like that. She says like this is like everyone can do this. And
Yeah,
it's like you're on a planet where no one swims and then someone's figured out a way to swim and it's like
yeah,
everyone can do it if they learn how.
yeah.
So so yeah, that
Yeah, I
just
do love that analogy because sometimes I've discovered that I have the ability to do something not because I practiced doing it, but because someone said, "Oh, this is possible," and I'm like,
mm,
"Oh, I didn't know that was a thing." And then I'll go try it, and I'll be like, "Oh yeah, I can do that,"
yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. I
which
guess
is really great, isn't it? Because it does definitely lend weight to that idea that we all have it,
mm,
and we do. I mean, you don't have to convince me. I'm certain that we all do. And I just listened to a podcast, um, Stephen Bartlett's podcast with Dr. Tara. What's her name? Dr. Tara Swart. She's a psychiatrist and a neuroscientist who lost her husband about 4 years ago. And she started receiving messages from him. But because she's based in science, she thought she was going crazy. And then all of a sudden, she's like, oh my God, you can talk to people who have passed. You can communicate with people on the other side. And then she's like, well, I need to know how this works. And so she's done all this neuroscientific study, I don't know, and she's come up with this revelation that it's real, which, and she mentions 35 different senses in the body for perceiving information. That's
mm,
where I first heard that. And I thought, well, I'm excited that she's made that discovery because it's nice when a skeptical scientist says this is real,
mm,
but we've all known it anyway for a long
mm.
time.
But it does feel like it's getting more common knowledge. Like it seems like all of these sort of
Yeah.
subjects are becoming way more spoken about in like
Yeah.
public and yeah, that
Yeah.
science is backing up what some people always believed. And
Yeah.
yeah. And I wonder if, there's all different theories about like the children that are coming in at this time, that all of these things will just be normal to them, that they'll just, yeah, grow up knowing
Mm.
they've got 35 senses rather than
Yeah.
thinking they have 5.
Wouldn't that be great?
Okay. What you said about radio also made me think about biofield tuning and long distance healing. Can
Yeah.
you explain that?
Yeah. Well, I think biofield tuning is is the ability to tap into someone's electromagnetic field and use the frequency of a particular tuning fork to do the work of releasing emotions and um, healing the body through creating coherency in the electromagnetic field, which then influences the nervous system, how the nervous system operates. And when I first discovered that, I can't remember where I was, but I randomly discovered this woman called Eileen McCusick, and I'm like, oh my God, I need to know about that. So I went and did a couple of different levels of her biofield tuning course. And it was mind-blowing stuff, but it also expanded my abilities and expanded my mediumship. And I think one of the reasons it expanded everything for me was um, tuning. I'll go back to the beginning. One of the things that stops people, I believe, that stops people from being able to tune into these other frequencies to perceive like a medium or a psychic is the noise. It's the chatter. Um, and the limiting beliefs. Like people, if you hold a belief that that's pseudoscience or it's wacky or it's out there, then you're not going to be able to do it. You're not going to be able to get past the belief to do the behavior of tuning into a different frequency. It just won't be possible. So so for me, the timeline therapy, letting go of all the limiting beliefs, having during the training, people are tuning, we're practicing on each other. So clearing the electromagnetic field of all the junk noise, all the noise,
Mm.
and it just made me even more perceptive. And so I think a lot of people can't do this kind of work because there's so much noise, there's so much static in the electromagnetic field. It's just jamming up all the signals.
Mm.
That's my
Yeah.
theory.
Yeah. It's a
And
good.
I noticed when I did my psychic training, I did it with a great teacher and I really enjoyed it. What I got out of it was a great system for doing readings. So like a step-by-step process, that just a structure for readings, which I really enjoyed. But what I did notice was in the classes, all the students and their negative talk about themselves, like the limiting beliefs that they had, like, oh, I can't do this, I'm not good enough, maybe like all this stuff. And I used to think it doesn't matter how much you practice, because a lot of these classes are all about let's practice our mediumship, let's practice our mediumship. And I am of the opinion, and I don't know if this is true, but I'm of the opinion that if we can already do it, then the only obstacle left to doing it well is the noise, the static in the field, the mind chatter. So if you can eliminate all of that and become a really clear channel, and the connection's already made, all the practice is great, but it's not necessary. What mediums should be doing is clearing out the static in their fields and clearing up their mind chatter. And the more clear you become, the clearer the connection.
And did you? How do you feel like all of this sort of knowledge and all your tools like influences your own family, like your son and your husband and your relationship with them? Are they interested in psychic stuff?
Yeah.
Mm.
I'm really fortunate that I've got an 18-year-old who's been exposed to this work since he was a kid, since he was 3. And I'm really fortunate that he and I can have conversations about this, and he'll talk to me in a way that I know he believes it, because he's seen me do readings. He sat in a room with me once while I did a reading with a friend of mine. He didn't even bat an eyelid. It's just common. And so, my husband, although he's not really into it himself, he certainly appreciates my ability to do this work, and he's very supportive. Um, but Harps is great. He came home the other day and he was telling me about a friend of his, and they're about 18, his friend group, 17, 18, and he said, "Oh, Mum, I think one of my friends is psychic." And I said, "Oh, well, if she's struggling with it, tell her to come and talk to me." He's like, "Yeah, I will." It was just so matter of fact.
Mm.
So it's normal for him. He doesn't do anything in the realm of psychic or anything. Like, it's not his thing. He's 18. He's busy.
Yeah.
But he doesn't reject it. Like, he doesn't reject it at all. He'll talk about it.
And do you feel like he has a good intuition? Like, I guess the other thing with the
Yeah,
blindfold vision training that we spoke about is it's like, in a way, it's these fun games to teach kids how to choose colors, but really, it's so much more than that.
yeah,
It's how to trust your own intuition rather than just
yeah.
relying on visuals, sort of thing.
I was always very keen for Harper to um, be educated and have these conversations about it, even though right now he's just a conventional 18-year-old studying and hanging out with his mates who are not into any of this. But I always felt that especially when he was young, and when your kids are young, you can tell them stuff and they'll believe it, which can be used to your advantage in a positive way because you can kind of prime them for those values and beliefs and those conversations later in life. So I always wanted Harps to be open-minded about it. So we would have these conversations and I would explain it to him. And so as a young adult, I have noticed that he's very good at listening to himself. He's very good at being true to himself. And I think that has a lot to do with it because we introduced these concepts a long time ago. They're just normal to him. The conversation about intuition and being still and listening to what's in your heart. I also taught him emotional regulation techniques as a kid, and he still uses those today. And that all goes back to regulating your emotions, being able to quiet your mind so that you can actually hear and perceive, which is what a lot of people are missing. So yeah, it's impacted him, even if he wouldn't know it.
Mm.
But I see it. I see the impact it has. And in terms of us as a so Kirk and I have been in business. We have a little manufacturing business that's now getting quite big. But in terms of intuition, we now make a lot of decisions after we've done the work of let's just be still, let's think about this. What comes from the heart determines often what decisions we make. We tend to take our time to respond to things rather than reacting all the time. And a funny story, years ago, early in our business, we made a big financial mistake that cost us about 20,000 US. If you translated that into sales, it was probably about 150,000 in sales. But it was only out of pocket, it was like 20,000 US. And that was a lot of money for us at the time. And we wanted to be really mad about it. But I said to him, this is on us because we both had the feeling that this was not the right decision to make, but we did it anyway. And he said, yeah, you're right. We can't be mad because it was our choice. Even though we knew intuitively it was the wrong one, we were a little bit green in our business and it cost us. But we did recognize that it was us, it was on us, and we couldn't be mad about it.
Mm.
So we trust our intuition a lot more now based on that experience. But that's the perfect example, I think, of how your intuition can serve your everyday life.
And what do you think about limiting beliefs around money and sort of oh, there's just there's a delivery person here. One second, I'll just let them in.
Okay.
They just keep beeping until we come because they know I'm always home. Anyway, um, And what would you say to people, or what do you think about the world and limiting beliefs around money and people sort of, I feel like there's been a big shift in recent years of people, maybe it's always been there and maybe I'm just seeing it now, but of people
Mm.
deciding to be more entrepreneurial or to sort of make money from doing things that they want rather than what they thought they'd do growing up. And
I
how's
think
that
there's a
been
lot of
for
things that
yourself?
I think there's a lot of things at play because I have thought about this before. Um, when I look back on when I was in my 20s, we didn't have technology. We didn't have access to information. So all of these conversations that young people are having, I didn't get to hear them until I was in my mid 30s
Mm.
because they probably existed, but we couldn't just accidentally come across something on social media and then go learn about it. Like it was all that information was really limited. There was limited access to it. So now, because it's all out there, there's a whole generation of people that can tap into all of this personal development stuff, which is fantastic. And I think that's, excuse me, I think that's why we're seeing so many younger entrepreneurs out in the world because they realize that it's accessible to them. And they also have all of the technological tools to allow them to do the business of being an entrepreneur.
Mm. Mm. Yeah.
Um, I I don't know how this works. Like I kind of I don't know how to go into this conversation. Like there is a shift happening. I I couldn't tell you if it's a spiritual shift or anything like that because I don't really know. But younger people are so entrepreneurship is a stage of our evolution where we are moving from swimming with the group and being like everybody else to a more autonomous, self-expressive aspect of our lives. And I think younger people, because they have access to more information, may be entering that phase a little sooner than people like my age did. I definitely think there is something changing, but I can't quite put my finger on it because I have contemplated this question often.
Are you familiar with human design?
Yes.
Yeah. So I just think it's
Not
interesting.
very familiar. It's not my expertise, but I am somewhat familiar with it.
Yeah. I don't know, I eagerly await 2027 because Ra had all these like predictions about 2027 being like that we enter a new like we go from the cross of planning into the cross of the sleeping phoenix. So we go from like tribal frequency to individual frequency.
Yeah.
And that like he had all
Yeah.
these, I don't know, premonitions or
I hope so.
ideas about like what that's gonna mean for people that like yeah.
Yeah, because I think we're now entering the age of power back to the people. You can see it in all the chaos, I think.
Mm, yeah. And also it's exciting because it's like 2027 isn't very far away. Like often there's been like, like in this year, long, long, long
Yeah.
away, it's gonna happen, but it's not in our lifetime. But 2027, it's like a couple of years. We're gonna see. We'll see what
Yeah.
happens. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I hope so because I feel like I feel like we're at that stage where there is so much available, there is so much abundance around us that everybody should have it. Everybody should be able to tap into that. And if what you're saying is true and people are, and we do have this shift occurring, how exciting is that?
Mhm. I feel like there's a real divide at the moment as well, though. Like, there's some people that really see like the potential and like, wow, we've got so much. It's like better than it's ever been. And then there's also like a whole narrative of like, oh, the world's like falling apart. There's like global warming and Trump and like, and coming from seeing Trump as a negative thing. Like, I'm not saying that he is or isn't, but there's this one side of the story where like everything's very bad and
Yeah.
whatever, and then there's this other group of people that where it seems like, oh, everything's really promising and exciting, and it just seems like a bigger and bigger divide between these worldviews. And as a mother of a 18-year-old, how do you like, are you like, oh, the world's scary and like I can't imagine that you
No,
feel like that.
no.
No.
Well, no, because what I've tried to teach Harper is, there's always going to be stuff happening. There's always going to be circumstances outside of your control. And how you respond to that is how you will create the future that you want, and or the reality that you want. So look, I'm fully aware of what's happening in the world, but I'm still going to do what I'm going to do. I'm still going to keep focusing on what I want in my life. I'm going to keep focusing on my own goals, and whatever happens out there, it's not going to steal my focus away from what I'm doing. I'm just going to, and I tell that to Harps. I'm like, yeah, because we had this conversation just the other day with one of his friends, and she's like, oh, I just can't read the news because it's just makes me anxious. And I said, you shouldn't be reading the news. You should stay focused on what you want and who you want to become at your age. That's all you have to worry about, because that stuff is outside of our control anyway, to a large extent. And so I'm not going to be dragged down by it. I'm going to stay aware of it, but I'm not going to be dragged down by it. I'm going to stay focused. And that's what I hope people will do, to not get caught up in the drama, because then it drags you down, and then you can't live your life curled up in a ball on the couch, living in fear and despair over things that you can't control. You have to get on with your life and mine the good, because there is still good in the world, and there is abundance, and there is enough for everybody if we have our focus in the right place.
Yeah, I think that I used to be really interested in like news and current events and politics and all of that. And then I think during COVID, it was like, I don't know, like lots of people, I feel like I just lost, like I was like, oh, this, I lost faith in everything and
Yeah.
don't look at anything anymore. But
Yeah.
it is funny that it's like you can go about your life knowing about nothing, and then like I know that there's like a community group near us, and every now and again I'll go on to like check something about the beach, and then I'll go on and there's like all these break-ins, and I'm like, oh wow, really? Like now I'm like
Mm.
a bit worried, but it's like I didn't even know about that before like checking on
Yeah.
this news site, like, and it's funny how much things can influence you. And then that if you do live in that world of like taking in all this negative like information about the world all the time, how does that influence how you feel and then what you bring into your life?
Yeah. Well, there's a saying, garbage in, garbage out. So what you put into your mind is what you produce. Um, if your thoughts and your feelings determine your actions, and your actions determine your outcomes, then be careful of what your thoughts and feelings are, because they're the bigger influence on what you create outside of yourself, right?
Mm.
And so if you're continually feeding your mind with all this negative stuff, then you're going to start producing or creating negative thoughts that are going to create the opposite behavior of having what you want. And you'll end up a basket case curled up on the couch, so despondent and fearful that you won't be able to produce any kind of behavior, right? I'm not saying that we shouldn't pay a little bit of attention to what's going on, but I am saying that you can't allow it to determine what your outcomes are going to be. You just have to keep going, because we are very powerful. And if you focus on creating the thoughts and the feelings that create the right behavior for you to get your outcomes. And regardless of what's going on around you, you're still going to get your outcome.
And do you see it like how you see it? Do you think that there has been an intentional, like that our power has been undermined and we've been sort of cut off to the truth of who we are and what we're capable of intentionally? Or do you see it as like just an unconscious evolution of this is where we're at the moment?
I think way back in history, it was intentional. Yeah. I've thought about this a lot lately. I'm not really sure why. I think, um, I think because in Australia and also Canada, where I've spent a lot of time, we hear about the stories of our own First Nations people talking about being cut off from their culture. And I look back at my own family history and way, 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 way back because my family's from Europe. And at some point in time, and my family's especially from Italy. And in Italy, for the longest time, there was a very big community of witches. It was very common to practice witchcraft. And so at some point, for whatever reason, the church came in and said, well, we want the power. So we're going to separate you from your god or your gods. We're going to take that power away from you. We're going to give it to one person. And that was the beginning of it, I think. The separation of our ancestors, my ancestry anyway. I can't speak for anybody else. But for me, I think that was where it all began. And sometimes I kind of feel a little bit of grief for that loss. I've been particularly interested in witchcraft in Italy, and I've got a bunch of books and I've been reading about the history of it and everything. And when I read it, there's a little bit of grief there because I think I probably came from a lineage of witches, and they had this incredible connection to nature and natural cycles and the mind. Like they knew all this stuff back then. So in a way, we've been cut off from our ancient cultures as well. And the more I read about it, I do agree that it was deliberate, which is a bit of a shame.
100%. I feel this is such a big subject that I've thought about lately. Like, so there's this woman, Rochelle Garcia. She from Innate Traditions, and she's speaks a lot. I remember hearing a class that she spoke about, and she said, like we talk about colonization as in the last 400 years, but it's actually like 10,000 years. Like,
Mm,
yes, Europe colonized the world, and yes, all the terrible things that came out of that are true, but Europe was colonized first. Like,
mm,
we were all native to Europe at one stage, like as European lineage people, like we were indigenous to Europe, and the only reason that indigenous people ever leave their land is when they are forced off, because like they leave for a better life. They leave because
mm,
thriving life is not compatible with where they are. So, and she talks about about like the witch hunts and like the Roman colonization of Europe, that it went on for so long and it was so brutal that
mm.
most people don't even have memory of it in their lineage. And then
No.
so when there is European colonization, like spreading out and doing all these terrible things in other countries, like, is it because that is what was done to them? Like traumatized people traumatize people. So yeah, I think that it's a huge thing. And I think as well, yeah, I've been thinking about this heaps. So I think in a
Mm,
way you could argue that we grew up in a like with the message of like that Western culture is superior or something. Like in a way that was the upbringing because Western culture is so pervasive and we have colonized so much of the world. But in my own life at least, like and especially in the last sort of 10 years or so, I feel like it has been very pushed that like, that Europe is the cause of all evils in the world, and that
Mm,
everything wrong with the world is because of European colonization. And, like I've heard people say that, white people don't have souls, that we are an alien race that was like, like there's wacky theories about everything on the
mm,
internet, but this real demonization. And like when I hear that, it's like that is just as stupid as any narrative against any other people. Like the idea that there
mm,
is any sort of race on this earth that is superior or inferior to any other race is equally ridiculous. And
mm,
yeah, and I think as well, like this, I also remember sort of growing up feeling like, oh, I don't have a culture. Like there's no culture. White people
mhm.
don't have culture. It's only other cultures that have cultures. And then I think for me as well, especially being married to someone from a different culture, when you see your culture pressed up against someone else's, it's like, oh, I do have a culture. Like, the contrast
Mm.
sort of makes
Yeah,
visible what before was just what you took for
yeah,
granted, sort of thing. And yeah, I just think it's been, yeah, I think with anything, if there's not the full story, then I don't know, then that creates, I don't know, like the truth is always sort of useful and beneficial. And I think, yeah, for European people to remember that like they did have a culture, they
they
did have
did.
a connection
Yeah,
to land, they did have
yeah,
all of these things, and it was taken.
yeah.
And you can, and I think by acknowledging that, that's also the path back to it, like that you can connect with your
Mm,
ancestors, that you can caretake for the land and all of these things that the world sort of
yeah.
needs.
And just the fact that you can, I'm not quite sure how to explain this. Um, it's not blending's not the word I want to use. Gosh, I wish I could think of the word. Maybe I can create a picture of it, but as a human being in a meat suit, to be able to recognize that I am more than my body and I'm more than my mind and still exist on this material plane, but expand my awareness beyond that to recognize and connect with everything that is more than this in kind of a superhuman way, if that makes does that make sense?
Mm,
Um, to to recognize that being psychic, for example, that's just one example, but to like that is a phenomenal thing. That to me represents a kind of magic. And to recognize that in a way that's kind of like, well, that is superhuman, isn't it? And to not belittle that, but to recognize it as something incredible, this incredible talent that we have that transcends everything else. It transcends everything else. It transcends all of the battling and the whatever's going on out in the world where everybody's like against each other. And if we could just transcend all of that and realize that on a spiritual plane we're actually all quite equal.
mm.
Let's can we go there quickly and get away from all this fighting and this bickering about stuff? Because we're so much more than that as human beings. We're so much more than that.
I feel like I've had like these light bulb moments a few times in my life where it feels like sort of like so cringy and awkward to even say out loud because it seems so obvious. But like I remember one was when I was in Adelaide and I was living there and I was sort of friends with some people that were different than people that I'd been friends with before. And I had this moment of like, oh, people have different opinions. like,
Yeah.
I always thought like, if I give someone enough information, they'll think exactly like me. Because it's like they're just missing the information.
No.
That's all that's happening. And I remember having this moment of like, oh no, 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 no. They actually don't agree. Like they actually don't believe in the same thing, and like that's fine. And I remember having another moment of sort of realizing like, oh, like I'm not better or worse than anyone. And again, it sounds so cringy to admit out loud because, of course, it's like of course, everyone's equal. We all sort of think this, but I think that there were ways where I feel like, but surely that person's better than me. Like, look at what's going on in their life. And then also, surely I'm better than that person because look at that disaster. And then to have this,
Well, I
like,
guess you
oh,
could say my circumstances are better than that person's, or their circumstances are better than mine.
yeah, I think I had a moment of
But
realizing
as a
that,
human being, you're not.
yeah. And I think I had a moment of realizing that, like, that if in this life we can't see the full picture, then it's like I don't know like the depth of experience that that person is getting in a circumstance that seems worse than mine or
Yeah.
something. And the same that
Yeah.
perhaps there is this person where it seems like their circumstances are much better, but perhaps they don't have this experience that I'm having and that they really are equal. Like, not just in a nice
Mm.
fluffy way, but it really is equal. And it was sort of
Yeah.
mind blowing to me. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um, we get stuck in the details, and the devil is always in the details, which is why I always come back to, you're more than your body, you're more than your mind. You're so much more than whoever you think you are, aren't you even more than that? But people get stuck. They get stuck bickering about the wrong things. They get stuck in their identities. And in my opinion, the more labels you put on yourself, the more limiting your experience becomes. So I don't know. I'm no expert. These are just thoughts I have. To be fully unlimited means to let go of everything you think you know. Let go of all the ideas you have about who you are, because that's not who you are. To open your mind as much as you possibly can. But that's also a very scary place for people to live, because most people like structure and certainty. And if you were to ask them to cope with things outside of that, they probably wouldn't anyway.
mm, mm,
Opinions, though, opinions are an interesting thing. Opinions are your model of the world plus the data or information that you have. That's what makes up an opinion. I think um, opinions are great to a point, but I certainly don't expect other people to accept them, you know, because my opinions are based on my model of the world and the data, the information that is available to me. And once you recognize that, you can actually, like, if somebody asks for my opinion about something, sometimes I will preface that with, well, my opinion is probably based on fairly limited data, but here's what I think. So it's not necessarily true or real. It's just what I know of that in the moment, right? And so everybody has a different model of the world, and everybody receives information in a different way. So you certainly can't expect opinions to be received and accepted all the time.
mm. And then, so what do you think about the concept of like evil and the devil? Like, do you think that there are two opposing forces? So, like, there's God as good and the devil as evil? Or do you think that evil is the absence of good? Or do you have a different model?
Gosh, Molly, that's such a
It's
big
another big,
conversation.
another big question. But
I've had conversations, or I've been involved in conversations like this with other groups. And um, to an extent, they would say that evil is a perception of someone's behavior as opposed to them being evil. I mean, that's a big topic of conversation. That's a big subject.
mm, yeah, I guess.
In a spiritual sense, I you know what, I couldn't say I know whether there is, the devil or not. Lots of cultures will teach that the devil is a real thing. I don't believe that the devil exists personally. I think the devil is the shadow part of yourself that sabotages you all the time. I think it's a perception. That's my personal belief. I don't know if it's true.
I guess there's just lots of contexts I can think of where it's like something looks evil based on the information that you have, but if you don't have the whole picture, then
Yeah.
yeah. And then I don't know. It is a big thing because I guess there's things that happen in the world that seem so awful and so horrible that it's like, how can you not call it anything other than evil? And then there's a part of me that thinks, but perhaps there is, information we don't have, and if you can see it from this certain lens, then everything is as it's meant to be. And then, yeah.
Mm. It depends, though. The arguments that I've heard are um, if all behavior has positive intent, meaning, somebody commits a crime. If you're the receiver of the crime, if you're the victim of the crime, then you perceive it as evil. But the person perpetrating the crime is doing it to meet a need. They're doing it to fulfill a need in themselves, which to them is positive intent. As the perceiver, as the victim, yes, I would perceive that as evil. But does that person see it as evil, or is that just them getting what they need in their life? Like, I don't know. I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, but it's an interesting perspective on evil for sure.
Yes. I don't know either. I guess there's
I don't know.
also
I mean, I don't know. There's so much in this world that I don't understand, and the more I know, the more I realize I don't know anything.
mm, yeah, I feel like after again during sort of COVID era, I feel like a lot of things, like a lot of, yeah, I don't know, a lot of corruption became really obvious. A lot of sort of, I remember having this moment of thinking like, oh, maybe me and my grandparents are on the same political team now, because like,
Yeah.
and then we weren't. They'd switched. They'd changed into
Mhm.
something else, and but I remember, and it wasn't just like COVID scammy stuff, but it was like there was a lot of things that happened at that time that made me feel like, oh, I've been wrong about a lot. Like there's a lot of
Mm.
beliefs that I held that
Mhm.
I changed my mind on. And then I
Yeah.
think since then I've been sort of very like wary to have a strong opinion on anything, because I've been like, oh, well, I was so wrong. So like this is what I think now, but who knows? Like something might come,
Yeah, no,
I
I
might change
agree.
my mind. And
It's hard to discern the truth of anything at the moment, which is why I stay very focused on what I'm trying to do in my own life and the outcomes I want for my own life,
mm,
rather than get entangled in all of that stuff. I just, what that's happening out there. For me, the only truth that I want to be involved in is the truth of where I'm headed in my own life and how I can be the best version of myself and how I can contribute in the best way that I can. And to hell with the noise, because what's happening out there, it sometimes seems like such a nightmare. But you know what? Let it just whatever. I just stay focused.
I like that advice. And, it makes me think of human design, of like the energy centers and like an open head and open ajna, that you're always focusing on things that are not important to you. Or, well, not always, but that is the shadow side of that. And I have open head and open ajna. And I feel like I, spend a lot of time thinking about things that are not relevant to my own life. And and just as devil's advocate, there's this part of me that sometimes I see people saying like, oh, that's just spiritual bypassing. And I question like, is that what I'm doing by like being like, I'm just going to focus on me, focus on my energy? But then I guess the other side is that how could you help the world if you haven't done that first? Like,
Yeah, look, I feel like if I get entangled with all of that stuff, then it dramatically reduces my own level of energy because everything's very heavy and I can't operate like that. And so I know what's going on in the world, and I feel like if I can change within myself and be a powerful, positive example of how to live a good life, perhaps other people around me will experience that influence, and maybe that's how things will slowly change. Maybe that's being a little bit grandiose, but I can't spend my life trying to convince people of what they should believe about what's going on in the world. I just don't have the bandwidth for that, right? When people are ready to move beyond all of that stuff, then all of that stuff that drags people down and separates them, once if we could transcend all of that, we could all live in harmony. But people are so attached to their labels and their politics and their identities, and those things are all so divisive. I feel like you kind of need all those things a little bit to survive in this world, but at the same time put them in their place, and then be more than that, be more than those things,
yeah,
because we need leadership. We need people in the world who are able to lead us beyond all of that.
yeah,
It's squabbling, the petty squabbling, it does my head in.
mm, yeah, and
We
I
need to
think,
move beyond all of that.
yeah, yeah, and again, I think that you like, I don't know, it is interesting that like you can have your internet life where it seems like all these things are so important or like this matters or that matters, and then it's like in your real life none of it even comes up. Like the example that
Mm.
comes to mind for me honestly is like trans stuff, that sometimes like there's like scary things about like, oh, people are trying to corrupt the children or something, but in my regular life it's not really like, it doesn't really happen. Like, and I can
I
think
know.
of, yeah, people get really worked up about certain things. Yeah, and I can feel myself do it too. I'll see like a reel about something and I'll be like, oh, that's scary or something. And then it's like, is it happening outside? Like, no. Like, yeah.
I've had mixed feelings about the trans movement,
Hmm.
and I recognize that a lot of those mixed feelings come from growing up in the, a, I was born in 1968. Was I? Yes, 1968. And a lot of my beliefs came from that, from 1968 and that 10-year period when I was developing all of my values and beliefs. And so these issues that around the trans movement push up against those old values and beliefs and trigger responses at me that then I recognize, well, that's not how I actually truly feel, because that's just triggering an old belief that comes from growing up in a very conservative time, Italian, Catholic, Catholic school, go to church, like all of that stuff is what was fed to me as a kid. And I have had to since confront it all and then um, recalibrate all of that stuff. I, I remember when Harper came home from school one day and he was having a sleepover with a group of boys. And one of the kids in the friend group had come back into year 6 as a male. Grade 5 was a female, grade 6 was a male, and they were all camping in the backyard, and it was freaking me out. I was like, "Oh my god, that's so wrong that a girl would be sleeping in a tent in the backyard with a group of boys." But I went into so I took myself out of this situation, and I went and I sat down quietly in my bedroom, and I started to explore what old beliefs I had that would have caused me to have that opinion. And once I had identified all of those, and then I was able to let them go using my timeline therapy techniques and other things. Once I changed the belief, I was like, okay, well, no, it's just okay. It's all okay. I'm fine with that. I wasn't expecting the circumstances to change. I wasn't going to send this person home. I wasn't going to make a fuss. What I had to do was go in and figure out what the trigger was, figure out what that old belief was that I had that was causing me to feel this way towards this circumstance.
So in that
And I guess, sorry, I guess what I'm trying to say here is sometimes what we believe to be good, bad, right, or wrong isn't actually the truth of it. Because consciously I was thinking there's nothing wrong with this situation. But there was this nagging feeling that this is so wrong. Oh my God. So I had to resolve them. I had to deal with that conflict so that I could deal with what was happening out there, not so that they could deal with it. It was all me. It was all my own. I had to do my own inner work.
And so in that example, what do you remember what was the belief that what was the core belief that made you feel like there was something wrong?
Um, First of all, a young girl sleeping in a tent with young boys, like far out. We weren't even allowed to have boys beyond the living room in our house. Um, you can't just be all of a sudden wake up and decide you're a boy if you're a girl. Well, who am I to say what you can and can't do, right? I'm the one that's always saying if you can transcend beyond your identity and recognize that you are so much more than all of that, well, that's one aspect of it. But here in the material plane, identity is a big part of how you experience the world. So who am I to say who you should be, right? And so I think my battery's dying. I just had to reconcile those things within myself, recognize which of my beliefs were not supporting that idea that because as I said, I felt like it was okay, but there was this underlying feeling that it's not. It was a conflict that I had to resolve. And then once I'd resolved it, then everything was fine. The problem wasn't outside of me, it was inside of me.
Mm.
Who am I to tell people who they should or shouldn't be? Right?
It's
That's probably a simplistic view of it. I mean,
it's interesting because I feel like I feel like I had an upbringing which was very much of like gender doesn't matter, you can be whoever you want, there's no rules, there's no sort of
yeah.
like very not conservative, very sort of open and
Mm. Complete opposite to what I grew up with.
complete opposite. Yeah, like my my mum was friends with people who owned a gay club, so I spent a lot of time around drag queens and like just a lot of yeah. But it was
Totally different thing.
totally different. Totally different. But when I remember having conversations about this with you when my son was little because I was, so yeah, my son was born and I was of the belief that there was no gender doesn't matter, you know? And I remember like asking my husband, like, what would you do if our son was trans? And him just being like, I don't know, like, we'll just hope that that doesn't happen. And I was so offended that he hoped that it didn't happen because I thought, like, oh, that's prejudice. Like, that's like, that's not full acceptance. So that's something. And the conversation I remember with you was not specifically about this, but I think I was saying, like, why isn't he aligned with me on everything? Like, why doesn't he agree with me? And you said, I think you said something like, isn't it good that, you know, that there is difference, that, you know, like, what if you
Mm.
are wrong about something? And he offers you the contrast to that, and there's opportunity to find something new. But anyway, I sort of like, I sort of totally changed my mind and was like, oh, whoa, like biological sex is important. And it's like important to honor that and to sort of respect the body that you're born into. And that you could be creating like conflicts and illness and like disorder by not sort of respecting the body that you're born into and following that design. And so I feel like I've sort of gone the other way, but at the same time I am mindful of, if we are more than our body, and like personally I do think that we've had many lives, so it's like you've been a male, you've been a man, you've been a woman, you've been all these different things. So in a way you are much more, and you are much more than your physical body. But I don't know. But at the same
Yeah.
time,
Look,
yeah.
I think, there are all probabilities and all possibilities for all of us to be whoever and whatever we want. When it pushes up against our own values and our own beliefs, if you want to be okay with it, then you have to do the inner work to figure it out.
And I think a big thing that
Because it's
changed.
not the other person, it's not the person outside of you that's the problem,
Mm.
right?
And I remember one of the things that really changed my mind on trans issues was like a podcast that I listened to that was on the Free Birth Society podcast, but it was like, you know, just talking about like men in women's spaces and what would it be like to have men in women's sports and men in women's prisons and male gynecologists and all these things who, you know, identifying as females, but who have male physiology, male muscles, male bones, and that sort of, or men in women's shelters. And then I don't know, I sort of have now I kind of have a view that in a way, it's like, is it the strict sort of boxes that we put on people of like, you have to be like this if you're a man and you have to be like this as a woman,
Mm.
that makes people be like, oh, well, I'm not like that, so I must be something else. Whereas if everyone, it's like, you can be whoever you want to be in the body that you're in, then it's like, you don't need to
Mm.
change your body because you can just be yourself without feeling like there's something wrong with you. Like,
The thing is, I can't speak from experience because I've never had that feeling. I
mhm.
don't know what it's like to feel like I'm not in the right body. I,
I
I
never had.
honestly, I can't. I always try and put myself in someone else's shoes, but I've never had that feeling, so I don't know what it's like to be that person.
I've never had that feeling, but I did have the feeling of like, you know, I read all these internet things of like, this is what a cis woman is like, and this is what a transgender person is like. And I'd read the cis woman list and I'd be like, oh, I'm not that. Like, I don't fit into that box. And I remember actually saying, like,
Mm.
maybe I'm trans. And it was just before this moment of listening to this podcast and being like, or maybe I'm just a different variation of woman. Like maybe that I am a woman and there's nothing
Maybe,
wrong with me, or there's nothing like
yeah,
I'm not a full woman. Maybe there's just like a million billion different ways to be a woman, and that I don't have to be like ticking boxes to be
yeah. That in
like,
itself is liberating, isn't it?
yeah,
To
yeah,
just be.
yeah.
That's the kind of world I like to live in,
Mm. I think it goes back
just
to
where
what you
everybody
said
has to
about
be.
labels, because I also feel, I guess there are certain times in your life where it feels like useful to identify with a certain label.
Yep,
Like,
absolutely
like
it
I've found
does.
like ADHD and I'm like, oh, that's why. But then at the same time, it's like, or even like, human design or star signs or anything. It's like, oh, I'm a Pisces
Mm,
and that's why I
yeah,
am like this.
yeah,
And then at some
yeah,
stage, you've got to be like, oh, but what do I want? Like, what do I want for my life? And
yeah. Focus on the
yeah.
real important issue of, what do I want for my life? Where am I going? How am I going to create that? Yeah.
Anyway, that conversation took a different,
It did
different
take a
turn.
different turn. That's
um,
it's look, it's such a for somebody like me to have a conversation about that at my age. So, as I said, I was born in 68 and I'm now 57. And the idea of identity means nothing to me anymore.
mhm.
It really doesn't. So, where once upon a time I might have thought, there was something about being or even just a transvestite, like I might have pushed up against my values and beliefs, but now I'm at that stage where I'm like, I actually don't want an identity.
Mhm.
I just want to be whoever I am in the moment. That's liberating. That's very liberating, you know. I can't speak for other people though. I think people have to just figure it out. They just have to figure out who they are and what kind of experience they want in this world.
I guess that's something that also makes me wary of the trans stuff, because I feel like, is it just a natural part of being young that you're like, I'm this, I'm that, I'm this, I'm that, and that as you get older, you sort of realize like, I am myself. Because like I think another thing, like when I was growing up, like there was the tomboy, like there were lots of girls
Yep.
that
I
were,
was a tomboy.
yeah, and they were
Yep.
tomboys, and then one day they went on to become,
Yep.
like they grew
Yeah.
into women, and I do feel for young people now that it's like, oh, like, you don't like wearing dresses? Like, here's some hormone block. It's like, you must not be a
I
woman.
don't know,
Like,
Molly.
sorry, the
That's a
conversation's
much
getting.
bigger conversation that do not have the expertise to answer. I did just buy a really nice vintage men's suit though to wear.
Very nice. What's your event going to be? Or no
I
event?
don't know. I just wear it out one
Fun.
night. I guess my point is, as I said, I'm at that age where I don't really give a shit anymore.
Mm.
I just don't care. I just am more than all of that, if that makes sense. Just being at a stage in your life where you're just you don't even have to accept who you are. You're just it goes beyond that. You don't even question it anymore. It's not to me when you say I have to accept this aspect of myself, it's conditional.
Mhm.
But to live without all of those conditions and to just be is a really nice place to be.
And then do you think that that is your age or the work that you've done on yourself? Because do you think that everyone gets there, or do you think that it is a process of sort of,
No,
yeah.
I don't think everyone gets there. I think it's because I've actively worked on myself to get there and to let go of all the labels, to let go of all the limiting beliefs, to, you know, release myself from the shadows. I've done a lot of work. And I'm not the change police. I would never say everybody should do this. But at the same time, I think if everybody started to look more at within themselves instead of the problems outside, then we could probably create a more coherent world. Because if everybody was just happier, I guess is the simplest way to put it, we wouldn't need so much conflict. Maybe we wouldn't need to die to be right. I don't know. Like, I just wish people would realize that there's more to them. It goes back to our conversation about being psychic and having these extrasensory abilities. If if we could rise above all of the other stuff, we could have this world exactly the way we want it. No conflict, no wars. Wouldn't that be lovely? We are more. We are more. We are so much more. And I sometimes feel like on this path, I'm pretty advanced. And then I think, not really. I haven't even scratched the surface. Although I wish we had time, I could tell you some of my cool psychic stories, but um, things that really would make you question the nature of reality. I don't know how much time we have.
I don't know. If you want to tell us one of those stories, do that before we wrap up. I'm intrigued.
Well, I feel like, we've kind of lost our conversation to a different thing, and I wanted to bring it back to psychic and this idea of there's more to this world than we perceive. So I really like this story. So one day, it was a couple of years ago, a friend of mine was traveling in Costa Rica with another friend. They were adult men traveling in Costa Rica, and my friend's friend got quite ill, and they rushed him to hospital. And one of the things he kept saying was he had this sharp stabbing pain under his rib cage. Anyway, he goes into hospital. He's gravely ill, and my friend rings up and says, explains the situation and says, "Can you help in any way? Can you use your tuning forks? Maybe do a remote healing session? Anything you can do to help would be great." So I said, "Yeah, sure." And so anyway, I went into my room and I set up my space and I got my tuning fork out and I did my thing where I go into a trance and I tuned into this guy's field and I did a bit of tuning forks. But when I was in the session, I was guided away from the tuning forks and was told just to try a form of prayer. So I'm just standing in the room and I'm focused on this guy, and all of a sudden I felt a very strong presence. Somebody else was in the room next to me. And I had a very clear vision. And so when I see things, it's not like I can literally see someone standing in the room. It's more like a mental image, a vision. And it was a native person with a spear. And he had come to me to say that the person who was ill in Costa Rica had many lifetimes ago been a slave trader who had killed his family. And so he had used his spear to kill him. And I worked with this vision, this person, I don't know what to call it. Got them to, what did we do? I think we worked on forgiveness and we talked about it. And I said, let's heal together, blah, 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 blah. I don't know what happened. And anyway, the session finished, he disappeared, and I just was like, wow, that was interesting. The next day, because of the time difference, I called my friend and I didn't want to front load the conversation. I just didn't say anything. And I said, "Tell me, did you notice anything? Did your friend notice anything?" And he said, "My friend had a vision that he had been a slave trader in a past life and had done something really awful to a group of people there. And he also noticed that the stabbing pain under his rib cage had gone." And I thought, oh, well, that's interesting because that's actually what happened. That happened. That's what happened in my room. So I didn't say anything
Yeah.
to anyone. I wanted to see, that's why I said I didn't front load it. I wanted to see what their story was. And I sort of came out of that, and after I'd spoken to my friend and I was talking to my husband about it, because I was a little bit shocked. Like, did that just friggin' happen? Like, that's wild. What the hell just happened there? But it just is the perfect example of I'm not insane. Like most people would think that you're insane telling that story. I knew I'm not insane. I'm a perfectly normal person. But it certainly made me realize with absolute certainty that there is something existing beyond me that is happening all the time. We say we travel back in time, but I don't think we do. I think it all exists all the time around us. It's all it's all happening at the same time, if that makes sense.
Mm,
I mean, I can't really explain it.
it's kind of unexplainable and it's a lot to hold, but it's amazing.
But the experience, it happened and a real world effect was felt
Mm.
in real time in that moment. So to say that we're not more than we are is just plain wrong. It's just wrong. I really hope that people can come back to that. It frustrates me a little bit that we need science to convince people that it's real, but if that's what it takes, that's what it takes. Like, whatever. When I work with people, I don't necessarily lead them down that path because that's a heavy path for people who are not ready for that conversation. I I hope that they come to those realizations themselves. I try to teach people to think differently, to be open, to clear out their system so that they're open to receiving, like we talked about earlier, like clearing the static in the field so that you can emerge as this amazing human being with supernatural ability that we all have. Like, wouldn't it be great if everybody could tap into that?
Yeah, it's amazing. It's an amazing story because I think we have, and I'm personally I have so many theories about like what causes health or disease or whatever. And I was just speaking to someone this morning that sort of reminded me like don't be too dogmatic because there is so much more that we don't understand. So even the best
So much
theory,
more.
you know.
So much more. Well, when I did the biofield tuning, that really opened my eyes to how information held in the field affects the physiology in the body, and how clearing that out it just increases your general well-being and your health, clears up your nervous system to operate the way it should. There's so much more. And as I said, the more I know, the more I realize I don't know anything.
Mm. Yeah, that's another good reminder.
But I prefer not to get bogged down in all this stuff out there so that I can focus on being that better version so that other people might think, wow, I want some of that. How do I become that?
I think that's a good place to wrap up. Do you have anything else you want to leave our audience with, or how can people find you? Do you still do biofield tuning?
Yep.
Like you can
Yeah, I
book
do.
that through your website? I was looking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, you can. And I do it, and I do it remotely.
Hmm.
Um, I do coaching still. I still do all of it. I still work full time in our e-commerce business, but I do, if I have clients, then I'll just work with them. I'm pretty flexible with my time. But yeah, I do it all.
Yeah. So how can people find you? Your Instagram or your website or
I'm not active on Instagram or Facebook, so most people wouldn't find me. I should be more active, but yeah, I'm not. Maybe that could be my resolution to be more active. But just my website. Everything that you need to know about me and how to book me is on my website.
yeah, I'll put the link in the show
Yeah.
notes.
Yep.
Well,
Wow, what a great conversation.
thank you so much for joining me. It was lovely
Yeah,
to
thank
see you
you.
again.
Yeah, thanks, Molly. It was great.
Thanks for listening to Here on Earth. I hope today's conversation gave you something to think about. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend and leave a review. You can find me on Instagram at Here on Earth underscore podcast. Until next week, I hope you enjoy your time here on Earth.